Hello sirs, mums, ladies, gents, this is Daniel Kennedy from the KML Group, Steadfast Construction and Design and Home Hug Limited. Today on your Wednesday dose of wealth wisdom, we are going to chat on episode 49, so that's a lot of episodes now. We're going to chat about why, if you go under because of the coronavirus, it isn't the coronavirus's fault, it is your lack of preparation. So on the face of it, that seems like quite a harsh sort of statement to make, especially when it's out of your control. But something I've learned it's a really hard learned lesson from all the experiences that I have, is you can very often blame yourself or blame others for stuff that you have no control over. The only thing that you have control over is your reaction to it. And I used to pay this lip service because I read a load of self-help books, and they would very often pout this sentence. Like, what's more important is your reaction to things rather than your you try to control other things. And it rings true. It creates a better business. And like, life is going to happen. And I have recently had a conversation with somebody who I haven't spoken to in a long time, and they stopped their property journey because life got in the way. And the advice that I gave him was like, listen, life isn't always going to get in the way. You can't use it as an excuse. It's always going to be difficult. And when you solve that problem, the reward that you get when you solve that problem in life is you get to handle a better quality of problem. There's no destination where it's easy. There's no destination where you get to rest on your laurels and you get to be like, I've made it. It's like success is a slippery slope. You're either going up, and if you're stood still, generally what tends to happen is you're slowly failing. And that's why when situations happen with the coronavirus, or it could be the tax changes, or it could be the things that you have no possibility of controlling. But what you can control is your reaction to it and your preparation. If you know these events are going to happen, and they always happen. This isn't the first time this has happened, and it isn't going to be the last. And what I mean when I say situations, I mean like industry shaking situations. So like the minimum room sizes, the HMO, we've had quite a few of them recently. It's been very difficult, and there's going to be more. There always is. But your preparation to them, and you knowing that they're going to happen, you should allow yourself to be able to absorb these sort of knocks, these setbacks, because as I said, they're going to happen. They're going to continue to happen. And already, so the rumour has it is that Friday is going to be the day where the whole country will be locked down like everywhere else. There's a few people that have been chatting about it. And if you, as a landlord, I've already seen messages saying, I couldn't have the rent not come in because I survive off that, or I couldn't possibly give tenants a rent holiday because I would go under. If you are in that position as a landlord, you shouldn't be living off the rent. You should have your arse in work because you haven't built a stable enough business to live off the income. You should have huge buffers. It's just a simple rule. Before we take any money, because we've had this is from the previous journey of making so many mistakes. We've made so many. So now, before we do anything, we always have a 6-month buffer of mortgage payments. So if we had no money coming into the company, we could pay the mortgage for 6 months, and we'll never let it get below that level. Because it makes us, as soon as we get below that level, it makes us nervous, and we do our utmost to get it back up. Be that borrowing from investors, be that maybe just slowing down the rate that we acquire more properties. And it allows us to have this really comfortable buffer and be really flexible and see us through these winters, because what goes up must come down, and then what goes down must come up. It's the nature and the general sort of trends of the property market. There's nothing new to it. You can look back in the past and see that it's happened over and over and over. And there's nothing special about the humans that are on this planet today. We're just like every other human back in the history. So it's going to happen again in the future as well. It's a cycle that we can't stop. So my advice to those of you who are struggling now is take this as a lesson. You fucked up. It's already too late. So the next time when we come out of this, if you survive, if you're living off 1 or 2 properties and that's your income, get your ass back in work. You have no right to be not working if you're so exposed and so risk averse, and build up your portfolio. Do some more flips. Get it to a stage where you're not as exposed and you can weather these storms. Like it's fundamental for somebody who's made so many mistakes. We now absolutely have to have this buffer just so our company can survive my bloody clumsy fuck ups. Oh, sometimes the gimbal does that. Sorry about that. I might have to hold it. Right, there we go. We're back in. And then following on from that, there's already sort of people putting their... Oh, this stupid thing. Right, let me hold it. Right, and there's already people putting their feet in the sand, like stamping their feet saying, oh, I'm going to evict them. I'm going to evict these tenants if they don't pay. I'm going to Section 21 them. I'm going to Section 8 them. And now the government is taking that right away from you. So you being a bit of a knobhead to try and kick someone out in a crisis like this has backfired utterly. And now what's your plan? You're like utterly immovable. You're like, this is a crisis for everyone involved, including the tenants. Already people have contacted us saying they're having their hours cut. We've got a few that are self-quarantining. We've got, and that means they're eating up into their deposits. We've come to an arrangement where they can have a real sort of weight off their shoulders by not paying rent for a month and a half. And it's only going to get worse for sure. Like now we're in sort of like damage limitation. We're not coming out of this smelling of roses. No one is. The economy is going to shrink. The rental stock is going to... There's going to be less demand for it because less people are going to want to be moving. Like new companies are going to take on less employees. It's all going to be a huge knock-on effect. And you've got to expect the worst but hope for the best and prepare for the worst. And how can you prepare? Right, as I said previously, it's already too late now. You should have had these systems and processes in place prior to going into any crisis. And thankfully, just because of the past mistakes, we've got them. And you're going to be very, very exposed. And all you can do now is just wait for the government. You've got the loans that you can apply for. You've got the deferred payments for the buy-to-let landlords if they're in your personal name. I imagine that will cross over to the company-let systems as well. But at the moment, the company-lets, I mean the limited company landlords, there isn't no benefit for you other than the short-term loans from the government. My key points that I've already uncovered is that quite a lot of my tenants are eligible for universal credit because they don't earn that much, but they're still working, but they still pay. There's a couple that I had a discussion with that are eligible and they could have had an extra £400 coming into their household per month. And this was discovered from the coronavirus and me doing a bit of digging, and hopefully now their lives will be a bit easier. So get yourself educated on universal credit, because I think a lot of the tenants will be jumping over it as they lose their jobs. Be proactive. Go through the motions of applying with somebody so you're able to educate your tenants on how to apply, because it only takes... You don't need an employee's note. You just need evidence that you're employed, and then you can get statutory sick pay from your employers as well, which is £94.36, and then the small businesses can then claim that statutory sick pay off the government. So if you're relying on the government to get you through this as a business, you've already failed. You need to be preparing for any bump in the road, because humans are humans. Nature can't be controlled. There's so many elements that you can't control. You can only control what you do, and having a big sort of pot just to not touch, just be liquid for a good percentage of your company's net worth. Don't try and do too many deals. Is always a good thing. And I'm covering up the microphone there. And that's it basically. There's 3 things that you need to do. You need to make sure that you're okay with universal credit, how to apply, who is eligible, because then you can educate your tenants, and then you can lessen the blow of how much they go into arrears. That's really key. Like, try and work with them. I would then also talk to the tenants about informing their employers if they self-isolate due to the coronavirus. They get statutory sick pay, which is £94.30 or whatever per person.
and then the employers have to pay that, and then the employers can claim it back off the government. So we've already come into a situation where one of the tenants was only getting £60 and they're entitled to more. So therefore he can go back to his employer, educate his employer on what is available, because it's not going to cost the employer anything. If you are quarantined and you're unable to work from home, you're going to get £94 per week, statutory sick pay or something like that, and then they can claim from the government. And the third thing is take a lesson from how badly you prepared you were for this. Again, if you are living off the rental income and it's only one or two properties, you are so exposed to any fluctuations in rental demand. If your tenants lose a job, that is not a business that's going to be safe. You need to scale to a certain extent where you can take these knocks and have a big war chest to absorb these blows, because you can't expect Mr. and Mrs. Smith or Mr. Johnson or Mr. Johnson or whoever they are, like Mr. Average, who has typically most people have a bad relationship with money and they don't save. There are one or two that do, but more people don't save than do. And if you're running a business, you have to be the responsible one to sustain any hardship that comes along the road. So prepare. Have at least 6 months worth of outgoings in the bank. So that's utility bills, that's council tax, that's mortgage payments. And in reality, the income that you're generating from your HMOs or your property, you shouldn't be touching it anyway. As a rule, if you follow some of the previous rules, you shouldn't be touching any of the money until you get that initial principal back. So say if you've got 10 grand in a deal, you need to get that 10 grand back, and only then when you've liquid again for the amount of liquid that you've put in, can you spend above that. So if you follow that rule, you're always going to have your original pot, and that will help you to absorb these blows. Don't overextend yourself. Don't live on profit before you've made the profit. And if you just follow that rule, naturally you're going to be able to sustain some of these incidents, some of these really sort of turbulent times. And I'm going to tell you a story about a fairly big landlord within my sphere of influence, and I'm in their sphere of influence, has gone under. Unfortunately, his properties were, he had a few developments, but the loans were registered against his portfolio. So now some of the developments have gone awry, and he's going into liquidation, and he's going to lose all his portfolio because he overextended himself and he tried to take too many bites of too many pies at once. And the portfolio is huge. I can't believe he wasn't as liquid as he was. And he just said it got away from him. A few people didn't stop paying rent. He didn't have the systems and processes in place to chase up the people, get the rooms filled, because he's got a good portfolio, but a lot of the units are empty because he was trying to self-manage quite a lot of it rather than outsourcing and leveraging. And him, now he's really in a difficult position because of this, because he wasn't liquid. He wasn't able to stop the slow decline, because I think no one's going to grow during this period. We're all going to have a measured decline, because how are we going to be able to grow in a place like this unless we're liquid for lots and lots, or we're an absolute shark and we try and undercut every single person who's suffering, who hasn't prepared. So I don't think many people are going to grow. A lot of people are going to shrink, especially landlords. We have to be secure rather than investing in expansion. I'm already seeing properties come back onto the market. I'm being called up by the few agents that I work with saying, this has come back on, do you want to have a look? They're quite desperate to sell. Will that affect the overall property market in the long run? I think not. Will it in the short term? Absolutely. We've got 3 developments that we're in the pipeline, so thankfully they're all funded. We're good to go. I've called the bank up. We've prepared the funds ready for when we want to refinance this, because we're linked to one lender that they're still happy to lend, which is fantastic. And it's really key that you work out where your lender gets their funds from. If they get their funds from overseas investors, the chances are very soon, because commercial mortgages are unregulated, if they get in a sticky situation, those loans are getting called in. So be really, really careful. Any bridging, any development finance, start to look towards your vanilla sort of companies, your Shawbrook, your Interbay, your Kent Reliance, the big companies, not the smaller, leaner, usually more competitive lenders. So go for the safe bets. I can see that happening, being the next step when those sort of funding lines get sort of dried up and they're really feeling the pinch. They're going to come back and they're going to recall those loans because it's an unregulated industry and it's what they can do. Right, that's all I'm going to leave you with now. The main takeaway is stop spending the profit before you've made it. Make sure you get your initial principal back before you spend it again. So if you'll put £80,000 in a deal, don't then spend all the money that deal generates. Wait till it gets back to 80k. Then you spend above that unless you're happy to put that into a deal. That would have sustained you and made you really comfortable going into this next turbulent time, and making sure that you're not overexposed, because 100% of nothing is much, much worse than, say, 80% of what your portfolio was worth. You've got to think of it pragmatically. Yeah, that's my take of it. I'm definitely not an expert, but just by living frugally and being so risk averse and knowing that these bumps in the road are going to come and they're going to continue to come, this probably won't be the last time this will happen in our lifetime. And there'll be other trials and tribulations that we'll need to face as we go forward. Just make sure you're prepared. And my rule is have 6 months worth of outgoings just as a reserve, just in case anything happens. That's what you do your repairs with. That's what you pay your deposits back out of, and then work to get back to that stage. And then also make sure you're really, really competent in the universal credit, because a lot of you landlords that don't bloody take DSS are going to be praying for your tenants to now go and become DSS tenants, because it's going to be very secure having DSS tenants, and especially if they do some sort of measure where they'll pay the landlord directly, which I see them doing. I really can, just to help mitigate all the arrears. And hopefully you'll begin to broaden your mind and maybe take on a few DSS tenants, because the experience of them, for me, has not been a bad one at all. Most of them are really, really nice. Most of them are just like me and you. We just have stigmatization against people who don't really deserve it. Like some of our DSS tenants are working. They just don't earn over £16,000. So if you earn under £16,000 and you're a couple, you're eligible for DSS and housing benefit to a certain extent. So I think a couple of things are going to happen. We're going to have a real sort of transformation where companies are going to try and change the way they do things and try and work from home. 2, landlords will start to accept DSS, and this will be a natural progression as we get more and more tenants that are jumping onto that sort of benefit system. And hopefully that will broaden their minds, and then we'll get rid of this no DSS, because you have to analyse every case differently. And then also I hope this will serve as a lesson to a lot of you to prepare more, because like having 2 or 3 months worth of rent, and if you have one tenant that isn't paying and that sends you under, you shouldn't be a landlord, not a full-time one anyway. Your arse should be in work. You should be working to build that portfolio so you can absorb these knocks. That's in my opinion anyway. And right, cheers. Thank you for your time. I hope that you don't go under during this turbulent time, and that you have prepared. But for those of you not, hold on, because it's going to be a bumpy ride.